Sergei laughed his cynical laugh again. And you really think you can make a difference? These companies have money, power, government influence. They don't have to listen to you. I know, I've tried. It makes no... Kirill interrupted. Who have you spoken to about this? Welcome to Behind the Bottom Line. I'm James Schofield, the creator, voice artist and prompt engineer all-in-one for this podcast, which is based around stories that I originally wrote for different magazines and publishers. This is season 9, and we are now in episode 9 of a thriller set in the diamond industry called 7 Continents. Let's see where we've got to so far. Kirill and Irina have escaped the rats in the tunnels underneath the deserted diamond mine at the Tuf Oasis. They are now back in Dhosk and want to talk to Sergei Vasilyev, a colleague of Irina at the university who used to work in the mine. Back in London, Macey has an interesting and alarming interview with Piet Hoodjink, the director of the London branch of Durban Diamonds. So make sure those headphones are fitting comfortably and let us begin. Chapter 17. Meeting Sergei. By the time Kirill and Irina had staggered down the path from the mine and back to the yurts, it was nearly dark again, and they were both too exhausted to think about going anywhere. But early next morning, after Roxana was satisfied that her favourite was unhurt, they set off for the drive back to Dhosk. Before they left, the old woman gave Irina a necklace strung with some rough-looking quartz crystals interspersed with tiny gold beads. She said I should sell it when I get married. I don't think she realises you can find this sort of thing in every corner shop in Dhosk. Never mind. It's pretty. I shall always put it on when I feel tempted to go exploring old mines with you, Kirill. Might make me come to my senses. That evening, back in her apartment and after they had each had a long bath and a good meal, Irina told Kirill about Sergei Vasilyev. I know him from the university. He's a little weird, but then he works in the IT department and spends most of his time writing computer code, so that's not unusual. A little while ago, he dropped by my office when I had a problem with my computer and he fixed it for me. I had some pictures of Catherine and Pavel on my desk, and he asked if they were mine. Then we talked about children for ages. He said how much he liked them, and so I asked if he had any himself. But he didn't really answer. It was like he couldn't bring himself to talk about something. Anyway, when we were looking through those old ID cards in the mine, I came across this. She pulled the card she had found out of her dressing gown pocket and pushed it across the table. It showed a man of about 35. He was laughing at the camera and his eyes were full of life. He's changed a bit, but you'll see for yourself tomorrow. We're going to visit him at the university. The University of Dhosk had always had an excellent reputation, even in Soviet times, and Kirill was impressed by the elegant architecture and expensive facilities. It was full of noisy, cheerful students doing the noisy, cheerful things that students do. It seemed a world away from the simple lifestyle followed by their fellow Kazbakis, the Kerkemen. These children are supposed to be the elite of Kazbakistan, grumbled Irina. They all have more money than sense. Vasilyev's office was in the basement, and was more like a storeroom than an office. The walls were lined with computers, piled one on top of each other. Half of them had been stripped open so that wires and hard disks hung out of their insides as if they had been slaughtered for some brutal computer god. Sitting in the middle of the chaos, the high priest of this cult fiddled with a screwdriver at the casing of the latest sacrifice. "Hello, Sergei. Can I introduce Kirill? He's a friend of mine from St. Petersburg." They shook hands. Kirill was shocked. This was the man in the ID photograph, but his appearance was very different. His eyes were sunk into his head and were surrounded by dark rings. His chin was unshaven, but it was misery that caused his stubble, not a designer razor. He wore scruffy jeans, flip-flops, and a dirty T-shirt with the logo of a computer programmers' conference held in Dhosk more than 5 years before. Kirill caught the smell of stale alcohol on his breath. Sergei seemed to worry that this might be the case and popped a mint into his mouth as they all sat down on whatever they could find. Irina began. "Sergei, what did you do before you came here to the university?" He looked surprised. "I was a programmer. I worked all over the place. I even worked in Germany for a while, before I got married." His voice trailed away and he looked at the floor. "You're married? I never knew," asked Irina. "Did your wife come with you to the staff New Year party? I don't remember seeing her." "Well, that would be because she's dead," he said softly. "She died a few years ago." He pulled out a self-rolled cigarette from behind his ear and lit up. "Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't realize." There was an awkward pause. Irina started again. "Sergei, did you ever work for Seven Continents, the mining company, on their site near the Tufa Oasis? You see," she went on hurriedly as he tried to interrupt her, "you see, we were there the other day doing some environmental research, and we found this." She dropped the identity card onto his lap, and his denial died in his throat. He picked it up, stared at the photograph, as if trying to remember who the person looking out at him was, and finally laughed a small, bitter laugh. "Yes, I suppose I did then. So what?" Kirill leant forward to speak. "We want to find out what went wrong at the plant. Something happened there. People like the Kirkerman were injured, and it was covered up, and needs to be put right." Sergei laughed his cynical laugh again. "And you really think you can make a difference? These companies have money, power, government influence. They don't have to listen to you. I know, I've tried. It makes no—" Kirill interrupted. "Who have you spoken to about this?" Sergei stopped and looked at Kirill, as if trying to weigh him up. Then he looked down again. Nobody. It doesn't matter." "Listen to what we've found out so far," continued Kirill, "and fill in the gaps in our knowledge. I guarantee I can make Seven Continents pay compensation. That's my job." Sergei was silent for a moment. "Tell me then," he said finally. "I'll think about it." The two of them told their story and showed him Villiers' ID card and the label from the acid bottle. He listened fascinated as they told him about the smashed equipment and the rat pack. "They were bad even when we were there," he said. "Some of the men would catch them, keep them in cages until they got really hungry, and then make them fight. They bet vast sums of money on the result. I never did that. I had responsibilities. You see, it was like this." Chapter 18. Durban Diamonds. "If you can't get to work on time, don't bother coming at all," was the first thing Macey heard as she entered the offices of Durban Diamonds in Piccadilly. After lunch with Eamon Fitzroy on the Thursday, Macey had simply called Piet Hoodjink's office and asked if he would like to contribute to a biography on Villiers. As she said on the phone, she thought Hoodjink could provide a useful corrective to conventional opinion. As she had anticipated, Hoodjink jumped at the chance and gave her an appointment first thing the next morning. Macey instinctively checked her watch to see if she was the guilty party, but at that moment the offender pushed past her in tears and disappeared into the ladies' lavatory. "Bloody temps! The same every time my secretary goes on holiday. The whole place goes to pieces." Hoodjink was standing by the door to his office, looking cross, as he addressed this last remark to Macey. "Hi, Mr. Hoodjink." Macey put on her brightest smile and put out her hand. "I guess this is a bad time." No, come in and sit down. I've been looking forward to meeting you. Just a minute." He walked down the corridor and pulled open the door to the ladies' lavatory. "After you've stopped crying and before you type those letters, bring us both some coffee," he shouted inside, then turned and came back to his own office again and sat down opposite Macey. As she had noticed at the Opera House, he was a tall, powerfully built man. He had a pronounced South African accent. "So, I understand you're writing a biography about Villiers. Is it an official or an unofficial biography?" Macey got out a notebook and pen. "Official, but the agreement between Sir Gilbert and the publisher is that it should be an honest account of his career, warts and all. So I thought maybe you might know of a few warts. Too bloody right I do. Where shall I start?" "Well, Villiers is well known for his enthusiasm for environmental issues. What's your view of this?" Hoodjink grinned. "He's a complete hypocrite. It's all for public consumption. I mean, I'll give him credit for being very good at managing the public relations side of the business. But there's nothing sincere in it. I could list half a dozen occasions when 7 continents' minds have broken their own codes of conduct in the last 2 years. Last year, for example, they..." For some time, Hoodjink listed the various offences of 7 continents, while Macey took notes. Eventually, there was a timid knock on the door, and another secretary came in with some coffee and biscuits. Mr. Hoodjink, is there anything else Sheila the temp should do?" "She can go, and tell the agency they should send someone who can get places on time. Oh yes, and you're in luck, Karen. If I need something today, I'll let you handle it." Karen looked doubtful about her luck in this case, but nodded and retreated out of the office. While this exchange took place, Macey was thinking fast. Perhaps Hoodjink could be provoked into revealing something that would show he was connected with Ekaterina. But the work that Villiers did in preventing the sales of blood diamonds was very successful, wasn't it? Durban Diamonds has consistently tried to make sure that all stones we offer on the market have a history and can be traced right back to their source. But this policy was only introduced after pressure from the United Nations, who were advised on this issue by Villiers. Yes, well, that's what he'd like you to believe. We actually helped draft the industry guideline, as a matter of fact. But wasn't it the case that you were fired from 7 continents at the beginning of your career for buying blood diamonds? Macey smiled winningly. A vein in Hoodjink's forehead started to pulsate dangerously. For your information, Miss Church, that whole story was a fabrication put around by 7 continents in order to discredit my work. If that lie should appear in this biography, I shall be forced to take legal action. Oh, I'm not writing about you at all because... Oh yes, that's it. Nobody's interested in you. She packed away her pen and notebook. Goodbye, Mr. Hoodjink. Please feel free to drink my coffee. I think it might choke me. Hoodjink banged his fist on the table so that the cups rattled. Watch your step, Miss Church, he shouted at her. I'm keeping a close eye on you and your friend Solikov. One little mistake and I'll know about it. And shortly after that, both of you will too. Macey turned and walked out without bothering to close the door behind her. She stopped next to the 2 secretaries who were standing outside, their mouths open in amazement. She gave them both a card with her name and a mobile number on it. Ladies, if you ever feel you want another job, give me a call. Then she left. As she walked down Piccadilly, a part of her was thrilled. Her plan to provoke Hoodjink had worked. She had found out something. But the information that she had got worried her. She had never mentioned Kirill to him. So how did Hoodjink know his name? This plot is thickening so much that if this was a sauce, you'd be able to cut it into slices and fry it. I hope you enjoyed yourself today. If you did, tell your friends about this podcast. And please rate the story on Apple or Spotify, or better still, write a review on my website, www.behindthebottomline.com. Next week in episode 10, we stay for the whole episode in Kazakhstan. But no more sightseeing for Kirill and Irina. We will find out what exactly happened in the diamond mine 10 years earlier. Make sure you have some tissues ready. If you'd like to buy the book or the ebook version of 7 Continents, you can do so by visiting my bookshop on my website, www.behindthebottomline.com. There you can also find Peril in Venice, a thriller full of drugs, murder and adventure set, of course, in Venice, and also a romantic comedy, Double Trouble. Nicholas and Timothy Aldrich, identical twins with very different lifestyles, change places and cause huge amounts of trouble before finding fortune and true love. So until next week, take care and goodbye.